Well, it's really great to be here with Shannon, who made the film along with her husband Jules, and Stanta Candola from Breathworks, who's going to interview Shannon and I today, do a Q&A. And we're trying to kind of mock up as if this was a live screening. It was going to be a screening in Oxford for the UK premiere. So we're doing this as an online version. So Stanta's here as the audience member, and that's really wonderful. But the first thing I want to say before we begin is just huge gratitude to Shannon for making this film. I think it's really remarkable. It's a remarkable achievement. Beautifully made. I'm a filmmaker myself, so I've got that critical eye. And it's wonderfully made. Very, very informative, very intelligent, lot of integrity. And of course, the message is so positive and affirming of mindfulness. So thank you so much, Shannon. I think it is really a remarkable achievement, and it's great to be here with you today.
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity.
What's your response to the film, Stanta?
Yeah, I was just going to say it's incredible, really amazing. What's beautiful about it is not only, as you said, the filming itself is beautifully filmed, but the content, so you've got a lot of the research elements in there, how inquisitive you are about the subject, and then your own journey, but it's full of heart, which is an interesting mix to get just right. And I think you do that perfectly. And just your interest in mindfulness, not just your own journey, but I love that you took it to the refugees and war-torn places, how well it can be received and how whoever you are that you can actually do this. So thank you so much for making that happen and putting this out to the world. Really amazing.
Thank you very much. Yes.
In terms of the filming, it was done a while ago now, and Shannon, first to you. How are you getting on with your mindfulness practice now?
Great. I'm certainly more grateful than ever that I have a daily mindfulness practice during times like these. I still meditate every day.
Brilliant. And Vidyamala, what about yourself? Do you meditate every day? Is it something that you do all the time?
Yeah, I mean, I've been meditating now for 35 years. I can't say every single day, but most days, certainly the vast majority of days. And usually I do a variety of practices. So in the morning, I'll do some mindful movements and then a sitting meditation. After lunch, I'll do a body scan. So I sort of do different types of practice, formal practice. And then, of course, mindfulness in daily life, just trying to be aware of my mind, my reactivity, my body throughout the day. And it's interesting in these times of lockdown, like I've been in lockdown for nearly 6 weeks. Now because I self-isolated before the government mandated lockdown. And I'm really needing to call on my mindfulness practice, mainly because my pains flared up quite significantly because I haven't got access to swimming, acupuncture, massage, osteopathy. And I realized just how dependent I am on these aids from outside. So I'm having to develop my inner resources, and I think I'm doing okay. Yeah, I have my down days, of course, but I haven't really gone under. And I noticed that I'm much more patient, I think, because of mindfulness, and I have more perspective. Like I know that these times will pass, and I will one day be able to go to a swimming pool again, I would imagine. And in the meantime, I just take one moment at a time and be realistic and patient with my own mind and my own body, with kindness.
So I'm kind of hearing that actually, in some ways, your mindfulness practice has kind of increased in some way to be able to deal with the times that we're in, and kind of bringing in a lot of heart, compassion, because, as we say, sometimes we don't have the resources that really help us to stay healthy, especially when you've got health conditions. As you were saying, your acupuncture or swimming, so you have to kind of be more resilient just in the body that you've got and being at home. What about you, Shannon? Are there specific things that you're doing with the lockdown and meditation and mindfulness practices that's helping you right now?
Yeah, certainly. My daily practice is crucial. It's really, I'm just putting the finishing touches on the epilogue for a book that's going to be accompanying the film, which is also going to be called My Year of Living Mindfully, and it kind of takes the story to a whole new level, expands it all out, and I'm delivering it actually to my publisher in the morning, and so I'm just writing the final epilogue. And I was writing the epilogue as, this kind of, very, profound journalistic, the world, the world was already really struggling when I began this film project. We were already facing and failing to tackle a host of mental health crises and a chronic pain epidemic. And then COVID has happened. And I think when the social scientists and the health economists start finding a voice in this pandemic, I was writing this epilogue about how, the mental health crisis is going to create more need than ever before, quite likely. And I realized that I was writing this epilogue as though COVID had happened to somebody else, like as though I wasn't in any way affected by it. And that's because when I was writing those words, I truly felt that way. Like I really thought, oh, look, I'm one of the fortunate people in this situation. And I just realized that we were doing the North American premiere of the film at a film festival in California when COVID hit. The festival was shut down right pretty much the day after the film had its North American premiere. I flew home to Australia a few days before the entire country was locked down and was forced to go into 2 weeks of isolation. My 2 children are at home from school, so I'm juggling work with kids at home, and we are rescheduling 150 screenings that had been planned for the film. But my perception was that this pandemic was affecting others and not me. And I haven't lost a single night of sleep. And as somebody who has had a life of suffering from insomnia, I think that speaks volumes about how I'm coping in this situation. And I 100% attribute that to my practice. Yeah.
I would agree. I think that even for myself, meditation, mindfulness, such a huge part of my life. It is my life. It's not separate from my life. And so, one of the questions I know people are interested in are things like, well, how do you make the time? Like you've just said, 100 and plus odd. You've got to rearrange all this stuff. Vidyamala, I know you've got loads of stuff going on, personal stuff happening. What's the shift which allows you to make the space to meditate? How do you make that happen? Because so often we can just say, I haven't got time. What is it that you're doing that makes it happen? Vidyamala, do you want to go first?
I would say that you start to meditate. One starts to meditate, and there's a certain point where if you don't do it, you miss it. Like initially, it's just hard work, and Shannon really refers to that in the movie. How at one point, I think you say you were hating it. And then you had a breakthrough, and one starts to actually feel the immediate fruits. I think for me, it took maybe 6 months before I started to feel that when I first learned to meditate. And then, of course, it becomes something. It's not always pleasant, but it becomes something that you really miss if you don't do it. It becomes. I often think of it like mental and emotional hygiene. We clean our teeth. We don't think twice about cleaning our teeth. We wash our bodies. Why would we not equally value cleaning our minds and hearts, to put it that way? And the guy in the refugee camp, he says, meditation is my medicine in the film. I think that's the phrase that he uses. And that really stood out for me. I thought, yes, it's my medicine. Mm-hmm. So I will make the time, because actually life is so miserable if I don't. And I think particularly during the pandemic, the kind of latitude in my being to stay well without it has massively diminished. Mm-hmm. So if I don't really, really work on my mind and my heart and my body, as a matter of absolute priority, then misery will come along very quickly. So as far as I'm concerned, it's not optional. It's like eating, cleaning my teeth. It's something that my mind and my body and my heart absolutely need.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And Shannon, what about you?
I completely agree, and I think Vidyamala is one of my greatest teachers. So everything that she just said, I wholeheartedly endorse. I think I'm quite convinced by everything that I've read now within the scientific literature as well, that there will come a time when mental training is seen as equally as important as physical fitness and eating healthily and getting enough sleep and all those things that we know we must do. I think we've still got a long way to go yet before the literature is as abundant, say, on the literature on exercise, but it's coming. It's certainly coming. And when Vidyamala was just talking about how you really miss the practice, I noticed I went through a period when all of this was really just kicking off, when we were kind of doing the biggest pivot of our entire career and launching a film online. My practice dropped back to I was doing 10 minutes a day, 15 minutes a day, and I really noticed a quite obvious difference in my mental state. There was a kind of a felt muddiness that happened in my daily awareness. It was like night and day for me. It was really, it's quite difficult to describe, and I can't even tell you an academic study that would back that up. But I can tell you that it's very, very real. And so when I'm meditating I've set myself a time of aiming for 45 minutes a day, which I know sounds like a lot to a lot of people. But in my experience, that's kind of like a minimum for me. Yeah.
So that kind of just takes me into my next question, really, and it's about, is there a limit to which you need to meditate? Like, what's the shortest amount for people that would be effective?
I think that's a good question for the meditation teachers, actually. I'm still such a beginner. I can talk about academic papers and what the dose, fledgling dose material is saying, but I actually think that it's something that comes from wisdom of teaching. Yeah.
Vidyamala?
Yeah, it's interesting because I was thinking, oh, Shannon can answer that one because she'll know the science. So I don't actually know. I don't know the science on it. I think it's like everything in life. The more you put in, the more you get back. It's very, very simple. Yeah. So a little bit of meditation, you get a little bit of fruit, and a lot of meditation, you'll get a lot of fruit. However, we live in busy lives, and I definitely think a little bit is better than nothing. So that's what I would say. Even 5-10 minutes a day, that's a start. And that's how Shannon started, I think. And then you now know that you need 45 minutes a day, and you know that because that's learned from your direct experience. I try to sit for an hour a day. Think of my own experience, I need time to settle, and that can take quite a long time, just simply to sort of arrive and land in the body and the breath and let the mind settle. And then, I've got some meditation practices which involve resting in the clear blue sky, for example. I've got some Buddhist practices that I do, visualization practices, contacting archetypal forms of love, for example. It takes time to get to that, and that's hugely beneficial when I am able to shift my perspective away from this tight, bound, cramped, sort of limited self to something much more vast and boundless. So I know for me that I need time. However, I think you're much better to do a little bit of meditation often rather than a lot of meditation very rarely, because that's what I've learned through teaching. Some people might think, oh, I need to do 45 minutes a day for it to have any benefit. And that's a massive struggle. So they do it once, they hate it. They're just sitting there with a restless mind and a tight body for 45 minutes, gritting their teeth. And then they don't do it again for a month, because it takes a month to be able to sort of gird your loins to have another go. Whereas if you were 10 minutes a day and you can manage that, and it's a little bit pleasurable, and you do it every day, you get the sort of cumulative dose, and you get you're training your mind, training your brain, your nervous system to keep coming back to a place of rest on a regular basis. So I think little and often is more effective than a lot infrequently, and the most effective is a lot frequently. Mm-hmm. But you have to just look at what's realistic for you in your life, and I really want to encourage people to be satisfied with a little, a lot, if that's all you can manage. That is still way better than nothing.
Okay, so the next question is, if I wanted to do my own year of living mindfully experiment, how would I start? What would I do? Shannon?
Oh, good question. Obviously, it would be difficult to, enlist the help of 6 scientists to track, your brain changes and your telomeres and your immune function and stress hormones. Difficult and quite possibly expensive. I think that experiment is an extraordinary teacher, and systematically tracking experience from a first-person perspective can be enormously enlightening. And I would highly recommend that if people decide that they wanted to do their own year of living mindfully, that they actually bring a scientific mind to that process and systematically track their experiences, because it's extraordinary now, even when I look back on my diary notes from when I first started, and the kinds of questions that I had, and the curiosity, the things that were making me interested, and now looking back and seeing how they've changed as my practice has deepened. And although I'm still such a beginner, it's quite a profound teacher to be able to look back and know that I can actually now answer some of those questions. But the second thing I would say is to perhaps start maybe just getting curious with an app of some description. Vidyamala's course, actually, your free course on Insight Timer, is really great for beginners, especially if they've got an inquiry around chronic pain. I did that and thought that was wonderful, and Vidyamala's voice is so awesome as a meditation teacher to listen to. But then I think it's really important to find a teacher, to engage with a teacher in real life, because apps can be really wonderful to get you started, but when you face obstacles, and it's really difficult for an app to actually help you for your, individual niche little issue. And I think that it wasn't until I had face-to-face teachers that I felt like my practice really started going to another level. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. Vidyamala, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, I think that, I agree with everything that Shannon said. I think we're a different character. People are all different characters, and Shannon's got a real gift for this sort of intelligent, inquiring mind around the science and the sort of empirical evidence. That's, I think you've got a remarkable gift for that, and you obviously love reading and absorbing information, and you can digest a lot of information. That's clear. But there'll be some people who aren't like that. So I think the main thing is, making a decision. I'm going to try and meditate every day for a year. That's a huge decision in and of itself. And then doing it every day, even if it's just 5-10 minutes, just doing something every day. And I think you started off on quite a low dose, didn't you, Shannon, with the apps? And then you built it up.
Yeah, I started with 20 minutes. Yeah.
And I think that's interesting, starting off on something that's manageable, because you actually want to do it. You don't want to find you do it for 7 days and then thinking, oh, well, that was like a New Year's resolution that didn't work out. So be very realistic. And it might be that you're a very creative, imaginative person, and what you want to do is do a drawing every day that describes your meditation experience, or write a poem every day, or play some music every day. So I think the scientific approach is brilliant, and Shannon's film is excellent for that. But some people, it's going to be a different way. So I just really encourage you to think what energizes you, what speaks to you, what's going to motivate you to do it every day, and then to somehow document your journey. It could be a visual diary. You take a photo every day, and that describes your mood or your mental state or what you've learned that day. So I think it's very important that we sort of find our own ways to tell the story of our year of living mindfully.
And Shannon, you have children. Do you teach them mindfulness?
Good question. It's certainly embedded in my parenting. At least I try to embed it in my parenting. It's tricky. I'm still struggling with this a little bit. And perhaps there may be another project in this about mindfulness for kids and what is and isn't appropriate. It's funny, my son, who is turning 7 tomorrow, recently experienced his first bout of insomnia. And it wasn't his fault. It was because somebody had given him dark chocolate, and so it was caffeinated insomnia. And he was trying to sleep and he really couldn't sleep. And so I did, run him through a body scan. And it was, a rainbow body scan, and it was age appropriate. And I think it really helped him to settle and relax and just be in his discomfort. But I think that is actually, for me at the moment, with the ages that they're at, because they're still really young and their sense of self is only just forming. My 3-year-old, couldn't ruminate on something even if he wanted to, because he would be actually incapable of projecting forward into the future or ruminating on a past that's only 3 dozen months old. So it's tricky, but I think one thing that I am really, really embedding that I learned in my year of living mindfully actually came from my encounters with Vidyamala. And that is this skill of what I call being discomfortable, comfortable despite life's inevitable discomfort. And that's actually something that I'm trying to teach my kids now. As a parent, my first instinct is to rush to my kids and soothe them and make them feel better. And, if something's happened that's upset them, I want them to stop being upset. And so I try to take that away, maybe by distracting them or giving them something pleasurable. But lately, I've been allowing them to feel their discomfort and just actually holding them through that discomfort and unpleasant experiences. And I really do wish that it was a skill that I was taught at a young age, because I think that my life could have been really different.
Notice that in the film that the Buddhist underpinnings of mindfulness weren't really explored in any way. I was wondering, was there a particular reason why you decided not to include that in the film?
Yeah, simply because my sort of origin point for the project was evidence and science. I'm a health journalist, and so my kind of starting point for the film was to investigate science. So that then kind of dictated the direction of the story. There's a lot of amazing material that hit the cutting room floor, particularly with Matthew Ricard, and some really interesting kind of back and forth discussion between Matthew Ricard and somebody like Amishi Jha, who's an attention mindfulness-based neuroscientist who is doing some interesting work with trying to prevent post-traumatic stress in soldiers. But then there was this kind of really interesting dialogue between her and Matthew Ricard about the ethics and the Buddhist context for that kind of work. But it was just simply that we didn't have time to go into it. I do go into it in a whole chapter in the book that I'm writing at the moment. And perhaps there's another film to explore that side of things.
Yeah, because it seems like there's a vast opportunity as well as a field to explore, kind of, because we know that mindfulness is rooted in Buddhism. And Vidyamala, I'd love for you to kind of maybe say a little bit about that. And yet, you know, with it being the Western kind of ideals and much more scientific based. So it'd be kind of interesting to see how both of these worlds can merge. Can they merge? Do they merge? And one, where are those kind of crossing points perhaps? Vidyamala, would you like to perhaps say anything along those lines?
Well, I think it's really great that you got Matthew Rick in the film, because he's so obviously a highly trained meditator and Buddhist monk. But he also makes the point, doesn't he? It's not about the robes that you're wearing, it's about training your mind. You know, and the implication there will be it's not about what you call yourself. It's about, are you interested in freeing your mind? So when I watched the film again, I didn't feel sort of Buddhism was overtly absent, as it were, but it's much more, as Shannon's saying, that the angle of the film is all about where's the evidence for this approach, and that's much more in the domain of science than Buddhism. In Buddhism, you have this idea or this notion of what's called skillful means, which is about using your wisdom to help the suffering of beings in the most effective way. And the way I look at that is that for a lot of Westerners, their belief system is oriented around science. So they're going to trust science much more than religion, a lot of Westerners. You know, you're more likely to trust the science around an antibiotic than you are likely to trust the science around archetypal deity, for example. Whereas, you know, if you're brought up in Tibet, you would trust the science around an archetypal deity much more than an antibiotic. So that's just cultural conditioning. And what I'm interested in personally is alleviating suffering and getting that message out as widely as possible. And I think using the science is really skillful, because lots of people are going to watch this film who wouldn't watch a religious film. They wouldn't be so interested in watching a religious film, but they will watch this film because they think, wow, science, brain scans, how interesting and exciting, because that's what we value. And then during watching the film, there pops up Matthew, you know, this remarkable guy who's clearly a sort of Olympic athlete of mental and mind and compassion training. And you can just see it in his whole demeanor, can't you? There's something that shines out of him. So I sort of, the way I see the whole mindfulness field is it's a highly effective kind of translation of Buddhist principles into language that our society finds acceptable. But then I think the next step, which is still very undeveloped, I think, in the mindfulness field and in the West, is once we've kind of got people's sort of buy-in, as it were, or interest, and they realize, oh, I can work with my mind, I can become less anxious, less stressed, and so on. Well, then that opens the door to the much bigger questions, like, well, what is the mind? What is consciousness? What is compassion? Who am I? What is the world? What is the meaning of things? And that is more the domain of religion, and I would say, in a certain kind of way. So then I think it's up to us Buddhists to somehow make those questions attractive enough and not bound by dogma that people think, wow, yeah, what is consciousness? What is the mind? How amazing. It's a kind of door opening, and it's really up to us to, how do we hold that door open and receive people into that collective inquiry of the mystery of life. But I think it's very exciting, and who knows what we're going to see in the next 50 years, 100 years. I think, as Shannon said earlier on, that mental fitness, mind training is just going to become a completely normal part of our society. But I think once you start training the mind in any meaningful way, then the big questions start popping up, like, what is my mind and who am I and what is consciousness and what is this life about anyway? And then I think that we need people who are able to meet that inquiry in a very open-minded, skillful, sort of non-dogmatic way, very like Matthew when he says it's not about the clothes I'm wearing, my monk's robes. It's about training the mind. And yeah, he's definitely, the door is wide open with him to this deeper inquiry. And I would like to think the door is, well, I hope the door is open with me. I would like it to be wide open with me to that deeper inquiry.
I was just thinking then about the film, Shannon, and that, you know, you start off really kind of basing quite a lot around scientific proof and finding, you know, having the research done and your own tests done. But as the film goes on, it becomes much more reliant on your subjective experiences. Would you like to say a little bit about that, the shift that happened or the shift in your own self when that was going on?
Yeah, certainly. I thought I was looking for black and white answers, and instead I realized that I would have to become comfortable with shades of grey. And actually, I'm here in my home office right now, and I've got a little post-it note that I wrote sort of at some point during the project, which says, "It's grey and the grey is okay." As I was kind of, you know, coming to terms with this, not knowing, but also being comfortable with the idea of subjective experience as a valid scientific tool. First person experience, you know, empirical first person experience is equally as valid as objective, data. And I am actually increasingly comfortable with that. And it's not to say that I don't enormously value science and inquiry, but in objective inquiry. But I also equally value my own experience now. Yeah.
Vidyamala, you are someone who lives with chronic pain. And would you say that you found peace with that? And how has that been?
It's an interesting question at this particular juncture when I'm, you know, having a lockdown flare up. Well, in the film, I think it's Craig Hassad who talks about separating, you know, the unpleasant sensations from the mental and emotional reactivity, which is definitely very much what my work is about. And last week was interesting because my pain was worse than it's been for a very long time. And I was a bit miserable, but I was able to just keep on noticing that and releasing it, notice it and release it, and just be with the unpleasantness. And I think that's really important. So it's not like making peace with the situation means that it's pleasant. Because if you've got chronic pain, it's unpleasant. So maybe it's what Shannon was talking about earlier on about being, was it discomfortable? Was that the language that you used? Very interesting. And my journey's been very much about learning that, because I used to think that I would only be managing my pain well if the pain went away. You know, that's the kind of simplistic approach many of us have. We just want something to make it go away, a pill or a drug or a surgery or something. And if the pain hasn't gone away, then somehow you're failing. But, you know, last week I also had times of peace and a peculiar sort of ease, you know, when I stopped fighting. And I had the image of an animal, you know, when an animal is injured, they just lie down, don't they? They just lie down and rest. And I had this image of sort of lying down and looking at the sky and stopping. And when you let go of the struggle, there's just more space and more ease. So to go to your question, there's just a huge paradox that the peace comes when I accept the unpleasantness. That's the paradox. Yeah. And that's a very, very hard thing to learn experientially, that because it's counterintuitive. Mm-hmm. But by accepting the unpleasantness, that's where the peace lies. Mm-hmm. So I'm that's my edge at the moment. That's what I'm trying to live at the moment. And also having a sense of humor, that's tremendously important. Being able to laugh at myself when I'm climbing the walls as well. Yeah.
And you've kind of the question, but just perhaps maybe open it up a little bit more, Vidyamala, that how can mindfulness help people with chronic pain or other ill health problems? How does it help?
Well, again, I think it's kind of paradoxical, counterintuitive, and yet quite simple. So it is about being honest and truthful about what is your actual experience in this very moment. Forget about the past or the future. The past is gone. The future's not here yet. But right now, what is actually happening? That's the first inquiry. And then breathe. That's important, because as soon as we resist the pain, we hold the breath. So then you've got breath holding tension, resistance, and that's a toxic little loop. So soften the breathing, accept the unpleasantness. And then one of the beautiful things that happen, if you can do that, you sort of dropping into the body, dropping into the moment. Yes, this hurts. This is unpleasant. But it's like a sort of big perspective that blooms out of that in the moment. And you realize that the present moment is incredibly multidimensional. So there's also the light in the room, there's pleasant sensation, there's the company of a friend, if you happen to have a friend around in your life at the moment in lockdown. We've had the most absolutely glorious spring here in the UK. It's like nature has just been having a jolly good time with human beings locked away. So, you look out the window, you see the birds, you see the flowers. That's all happening in the present moment as well. But if you're all kind of tight and bound and not wanting this experience, then you're crushing everything out. So you don't notice the birds, you don't notice the flowers, you don't notice the light. But paradoxically, if you sort of drop towards, oh yeah, this really hurts, breathe, soften, and then it's like, oh, and there's this as well. So you have this much, much richer life. But it does rely on enormous courage and heroism. I always think it's a very heroic path, because you have to be willing to experience what's actually happening. And it's horrible. It's unpleasant. Nobody likes it. But then you get the reward is you also then can taste everything else in the moment. And then there's a deeper thing, whereas it's not just about oneself. So I would say I'm more interested in sort of healing my attitude to the human condition, not just to my pain, but everybody has pain. Everybody has difficulties. We're living now in this global pandemic at this time. And, one can rail against that or think it shouldn't be like this, or it's somebody's fault. Look for blame. We know there's a world leader who's very good at that. But this is the human condition. These things happen. There have been plagues all through human history. And if it's not a pandemic, there's other difficulties that come along. So how can we sort of heal our attitude so that we understand this is part of the deal of, being a human being on this planet, and just be able to meet each moment with more ease, more realism, more love, more empathy. That's the other thing I'm interested in, is healing my attitude to my own pain so that I can then also have an open-hearted attitude to other people's pain. And again, in a way that interests me more than just managing my own pain better. But I want to be able to not resist other people's pain, because of course if we're resisting our own pain, then we're going to resist everybody's pain, because it's other people's pain is going to remind us of the very thing we're trying to avoid in ourselves, if you know what I mean. So how can we open our hearts to this kind of very complex human condition that is shot through with pleasure and pain, and always has been and always will be.
Yeah, beautifully put there. Thank you, Vidyamala. You mentioned the pandemic, and I think we might sort of move and speak of that really. What would you say, this question to the both of you, Shannon, you'd like to have a go first. How can people cope in these times of pandemic? What are the kind of some of the mindfulness skills or tools or meditations that you think would be really useful while people are in lockdown?
I'm not a meditation teacher, so I am going to throw the ball straight back to the meditation teacher to answer that. Apart from practicing every day, I don't really feel like, I can speak about what I do, but I think that it's probably best for me to pass that one on to Vidyamala.
Do you want to say a little bit about what kind of things are you doing? lockdown that might be different than before?
For me,
from normal, I actually haven't changed anything. That's what's kind of weird for me. The odd thing is that I have not changed my daily practice in lockdown. I'm still meditating every day. I'm still practicing the exact same techniques that I was practicing. And it's because the practice that I have is serving me so incredibly well. But I think I was speaking recently to Craig Hassard, and he was saying, it does feel a little bit like this is a marathon at the moment. But if you look at, the 35 kilometers you still have to jog, then you're going to start feeling terrified. But if you just look at the step in front of you, then everything's going to be entirely manageable. And perhaps that's something that my practice has been kind of innately teaching me. But I'm super curious actually to know what Vidyamala's advice is to people in the lockdown.
Well, the thing I keep saying to people is we're all doing our best. I think just to really remember that every single person is doing their best. So even if you're having a really, really tough day, even in that, however you're managing is the best you can do in that moment. Because I think what can happen is we can just pile on the judgments. I should be doing more. And I know there's been a little bit of debate on social media where some people are saying, in lockdown, you should be learning a language or learning to draw or learning to play a musical instrument or God knows what else. And other people saying, hang on a minute, just actually surviving the lockdown, that's enough. So I'm of the latter, I think, we're all doing our best. And actually, I've come up with 3 words, which is calm, care, and connection. So I think calming practices are super important at the moment because it calms the nervous system. Because I think there is a kind of existential threat that we can feel. We don't know where this thing's going. We don't know what life's going to look like. People have lost their livelihoods. Maybe you've lost a loved one, where I think the nervous system is a bit in the fight, flight, freeze response for a lot of people. Even if it's quite subtle, I think that's there. So I'm teaching a lot of calming practices, breathing practices, grounding practices, just to keep on dialing back into the parasympathetic nervous system. So I think that's really important. Care is like self-care. It's 2 words, which is patience and kindness. I think we need a lot of patience and we need a lot of kindness to whatever's arising, be that physical pain, discomfort, or, irritation with the people you're living with. Because, we're cooped up with people. And for some people, that's going to be hard. Some people, it's going to be easier. And then the 3rd one, which is really, really important, which is connection. So to use our imagination to connect with humanity. And there's lots of evidence that the imagination is incredibly powerful. Imagining connection can be as powerful as actual connection. And there's a lovely saying in a Buddhist, Tibetan Buddhist teaching, which is whatever you're experiencing, think of others. That right now, whatever you're experiencing right now, there's someone else in the world having pretty much the same experience. So what that does is it stops us closing down and going inwards and sort of getting into a kind of paucity mentality. My life is awful and everyone else's life is easier. That's a very easy thing for us to do. It's like, oh, I can use this experience as a touchstone to empathy, and I can breathe with the other person as well as myself. And as I bring my mindfulness skills to ease my own suffering, I can also wish that other person well. So just continually sort of opening the windows of our awareness to include all these other people. And something like 2/3 of the world is in lockdown at the moment. I mean, it's absolutely unbelievable. It's phenomenal. And, like Shannon, in many ways, my life hasn't changed much. I'm one of the lucky ones. I work from home anyway. I've got a little garden. We've had this glorious spring. Some ways my life's got a bit easier. I'm not rushing around the place, traveling everywhere. That my life's got a little bit more spacious, but I know that's not true for a lot of people. So just continually opening the heart, opening the mind to think of others. I think that's really, really important. Not as a denial of self. That's an important point. You know, you're landing in your own experience with the calming, you're caring, kindness, patience, breathing, and then, what about all the other people? So we're cultivating love as well. So it's awareness and love. Yeah. But mainly just, whatever we're doing, it's enough. We're doing our best. It might be you're doing 3 conscious breaths a day. Well, that's better than no conscious breaths a day. Yeah. But don't forget the power of the mind. That's something that the movie is all about, the power of the mind. And whoever's watching this video, presumably you're interested enough to watch the film, and you're interested enough to be watching this dialogue, which means you must have an interest in your mind. And that is your gold. We've all got a mind, and what we do with our mind will have an effect. Yeah, so just treasure that amazing capacity that we all have.
So if people were interested in acquiring more resources, or even understanding where there might be courses, especially related to pain, chronic pain, where would they go, Vidyamala?
Well, there's lots of stuff on the Breathworks website, breathworks-mindfulness.org.uk. And then also I've got my own personal website, which is Vidyamala, what is it? I think it's Vidyamala-Burch.com. And I've got lots of resources there, talks, guided meditations, books, and so on. So go there. There's the course that Shannon mentioned that's on Insight Timer, which is a 10-day course, Methods for Managing Pain and Illness. It's just 10 to 15 minutes a day. So there's lots of resources there that I would suggest.
And would you say any resources that are different for chronic pain or ill health and mental health, or would everybody still be going to the same place and looking for those resources?
I think for the mental health, there's lots on the Breathworks website as well. We've got a mindfulness for stress program, mindfulness in the workplace. There's lots there. There's also mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, which has been specifically designed for people with depression. And that's a very, very good course. And if you go to the Oxford Mindfulness Centre website, you'll find out a lot of information there about MBCT, which is it's a validated program, lots of really good research on that. It seemed to be, I think, as effective as antidepressants for people. I think it's for adults who have had at least 3 episodes of depression. But it's a really, really good program. So that's also something people can look to.
Brilliant, thank you. And Shannon, is there any resources that you'd like to share?
Oh, I think maybe I would just say if people enjoyed the film, got something out of the film, then please share it with others. It's going to be available for free for the first week of its launch. This is a huge online experiment for us, but it is my absolute pleasure to make it available for free. And then look out for the book, which will be available in September.
Thank you both very, very much for this. It's been really fascinating.
I'll just jump in one. I just like to add one more thing to the conversation, which is that Vidyamala, I'm so grateful to you for the work that you're doing. I imagine that when you were younger, you never thought that you would become an expert in how to suffer, let alone an expert in teaching other people how to suffer. And I'm sorry to say this, but I'm so grateful that you are that expert. I'm sorry that, your life of suffering has made you this expert, but I'm so grateful that you're here and that you're so generous with what you know and with your experiences. And I want you to know how enormously influential your work is on me, and how much of an impact you've made on my life, and I know on thousands and thousands of others as well. And I really wish that anybody who had any form of chronic pain was, given access to your resources, because I think that the medical system would look fundamentally different if what you're teaching was embedded, into healthcare. Yeah, so thank you.
Thank you very much, Shannon. Yeah, that's really beautiful to hear, and it's I would never have wanted to be famous as the chronic pain person. I think in some ways it's good from an ego point of view, because let's face it, it's not sexy to be the suffering expert. So I can't get too full of myself, so it's quite, my body humbles me every day, and I think I'm grateful for that as well. I'm grateful for that as well, because it keeps me humble. And actually I want to stay humble. It's important to me. That's an important value. And I'd also like to say to you, Shannon, you hold it all very lightly, but it's actually truly exceptional that you're on lockdown with 2 small children, stuck at home. You're delivering a book to your publisher in the morning. You're rescheduling 150 screenings, and when you talk about the impact of COVID, it's like, well, it's not really impacting me, because you've got your practice. And you say that all as if it's kind of, well, that's obvious, but actually that is truly phenomenal. Having to, and I know with this film, it's been such a labor of love. I think you filmed me 2 years ago, it's quite a long time ago. And I know funding's been an issue, and you have put your heart and soul into this. And then you've organised all these screenings around the world, and you're having to pull them all one after another and do the whole thing online. And that's enough to tip some people over the edge. And here you are smiling and saying, I just keep practicing and it's all fine. I mean, that's amazing. So I hope you recognise what an achievement that is.
Well, I'm glad that I have mindfulness. Let's just say that.
Yeah.
And actually, I love the bits in the film where you're very honest, like lying on that hotel bed, thinking, why am I doing what I'm doing? And talking to Jules, and, so we get to see that you are actually human, even though you're amazing. But it's just, you're embodying something, because many people in the world are having to suddenly change their life because of the virus, and you're embodying that can be done with grace and good humor and success. So well done.
Thank you. Yes.
And thank you so much, Santa, for being our wonderful audience member and asking the questions and engaging so creatively with the whole process. Thank you so much.
Happy to do that. Really lovely to meet you, Sean.
Thank you.